The marketplace of Valora Prime was alive with sound and color. Tall spires of steel rose against the red sky, glowing with alien banners and streaming lights. Merchants shouted prices in strange tongues, trading crystals, weapons, and fruits from distant worlds. Yet in all this noise, there was a girl sitting alone near the steps of a food hall. Her green skin marked her heritage, her silver hair tangled with dust, her clothes worn and torn. She was young, but her eyes already carried the weight of rejection. Her name was Alira, and no one wanted to sit with her. Inside the hall, long tables were filled with her own people. They laughed and ate together, bowls clattering, drinks spilling, but not one of them allowed her to enter. The reason was not her hunger. It was her bloodline. Her mother came from a family considered stained, tied long ago to rebels who lost against the Empire. For generations, the shame passed down. Alira had done nothing wrong, yet she carried a burden she never chose. She held a tray of simple food, trembling as she stepped near the doors of the hall. Guards blocked her way without speaking. She turned back and sat on the cold stone outside, trying to eat quickly so no one would throw things at her. Each bite tasted bitter. The laughter from inside was louder than her heartbeat. The shame cut deeper than hunger. That was when he saw her, Jared. A human soldier stationed on Valora Prime was walking back from patrol with dust still on his boots. His uniform was simple, his build strong, his movements steady. Humans were rare here, often treated with suspicion, but Jared had learned to ignore the whispers. His eyes caught the sight of Alira on the steps, eating alone, her shoulders shaking. As if the weight of the galaxy pressed on her back, he slowed down, watching. The others walked past her as if she did not exist. Some even sneered. Jared felt a cold anger stir inside him. He remembered Earth, the lessons of his people, the long history of standing beside those who were outcast. Without hesitation, he turned into the food hall. The sudden silence was sharp. The alien stopped their chatter as the human walked in, his boots echoing on the stone floor. He picked up a tray, then another, filling both with food. His broad shoulders and calm defiance drew every eye. Some muttered in their language, some laughed nervously. A guard stepped forward, but Jared ignored him. When he came back outside, Alira lifted her head in surprise. She did not understand why this soldier was walking toward her. He set one tray in front of her, still warm, then sat beside her as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "You shouldn't eat alone," Jared said simply. Her eyes widened. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. "They will hate you for this," she whispered. "Let them," Jared replied. He smiled faintly and broke a piece of bread, eating it without care. From inside, voices rose. The aliens watched through the glass walls, their faces twisted with outrage. A human soldier sitting beside a girl of stained bloodline. It was unthinkable. Yet Jared did not move. He spoke to her about simple things, about patrol, about the strange colors of the sky. At night, she listened, still trembling, but the corner of her lips curved upward for the first time. For years she had been invisible. For years she had eaten with shame, hidden from her own people. Now for the first time, someone sat beside her, not in pity but in defiance. The warmth of the food no longer mattered. The warmth of the gesture lit a fire in her chest she never thought possible. Inside the hall, the leaders argued. To them, Jared had insulted their tradition, broken a silent rule. Their voices grew louder, their fists slammed tables. A crowd gathered, pointing at the window. Some shouted insults, some demanded punishment. Yet outside, on the cold stone, the human and the outcast girl ate in peace, as if the storm around them did not exist. But storms have a way of breaking barriers. And that small act, that simple choice of sitting down, would soon ripple far beyond the steps of the food hall. It would be remembered not as a meal, But as the first spark of defiance in a world built on chains. Asterisk, the news spread across Valora Prime faster than fire in dry grass. By the next day, every market stall and crowded street whispered about the human who had defied the rules of the hall. Some called him brave, others called him foolish, but all agreed it was dangerous. Humans were guests in the empire, tolerated, but never truly trusted. To stand against custom was to invite punishment. Alira walked through the market with her head lower than usual. She felt every eye burning into her skin. Mothers pulled their children close when she passed. Merchants frowned and turned their backs. Some hissed insults in her direction, spitting words like stained and traitor. Yet beneath the scorn, there was something new in their gazes: fear. Not fear of her, but fear of what she represented now. She was no longer just a forgotten outcast. She was the girl a human had chosen to sit beside. She clutched her cloak tighter, trying to vanish into the crowd. Her heart pounded with shame, but also with something else she did not dare name. When she closed her eyes, she could still see him. Jared's calm smile, his voice steady as he told her she should never eat alone. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Jared, meanwhile, returned to his barracks with a storm of trouble waiting. His commander, a tall officer with skin like bronze metal, stood waiting for him. The alien's eyes glowed with anger. "You will explain yourself, human," the commander said. Jared shrugged. "I sat down and ate, that's all. You disgraced the hall. You mocked our traditions. Do you realize the insult you've given?" Jared met his glare without flinching. "I fed a hungry girl. If that's an insult, maybe your traditions need changing." Gasps echoed around the barracks. Soldiers, alien and human alike, exchanged stunned glances. No one spoke to the commander like that. Yet Jared stood firm, his voice level, his hands relaxed at his sides. The commander stepped close, his breath hot with fury. "Your actions will not be forgotten. The council will hear of this. You have endangered the fragile peace between our people. Peace built on cruelty isn't peace," Jared said softly. The commander's hand twitched as if he might strike, but he turned sharply and left. The silence in the barracks was heavy. Some soldiers looked at Jared with admiration, others with scorn. Jared ignored them all. He sat on his bunk, polishing his weapon, as if nothing had happened. That night, Alira sat by the river outside the city walls. The water glowed faintly under the red moon, and the air smelled of iron and dust. She had come here often, hiding from the hatred of her own people, but tonight felt different. She was not alone. She heard footsteps and turned. Jared stood there, holding 2 cups of steaming broth. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "They will see you." "Then let them see," Jared said, handing her the cup. "You need to eat." She took it with trembling hands, her voice cracked. "Why are you doing this?" He looked out at the river, his jaw tight. "Because I've seen this before. On Earth, long ago, we made the same mistakes. We divided ourselves by blood, by color, by names that didn't matter. And every time, it ended in pain. I won't watch it happen again, not if I can stop it." Alira stared at him, the warmth of the broth seeping into her hands. No one had ever spoken to her like this. His words pierced the walls she had built around her heart. For the first time, she felt something dangerous: hope. But hope has a cost. From the shadows, 2 figures watched. They were soldiers of the city, their armor gleaming faintly under the moonlight. One whispered to the other, their voices sharp with contempt. "The council must know. The human grows bold. He must be silenced." The next day, banners of warning appeared across the streets. The council declared that no one was to share food with the outcast girl. Any who defied the order would be punished. Markets closed their doors to her. Guards pushed her away from wells. Children threw stones at her feet. Yet when she sat outside again with her tray of scraps, Jared was there. He sat beside her, not Once, not twice, but every day, the outrage grew. Crowds gathered, spitting curses, shouting for his removal. Still, Jared did not move. Elira's hands shook each time she lifted her food, afraid of what might happen. But Jared's calm presence steadied her. "Look at them," he said quietly. "They fear you because they know tradition is weaker than truth. And truth is simple: you deserve to live with dignity." Tears burned her eyes, though she did not let them fall. She had lived her whole life in silence, but now with him beside her, she felt her voice stirring. She felt strength waking inside her that she never knew she had. The storm was coming. And deep inside, both Elira and Jared knew the world around them would never be the same again. The council chamber of Valora Prime echoed with angry voices. Tall pillars of stone curved into the ceiling, glowing faintly with red light from the moons above. At the center, counselors in flowing robes sat around a long table, their expressions twisted with fury. Reports of the humans' defiance had spread across the city, and now the leaders demanded punishment. "He mocks our traditions," one counselor shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "To sit beside a stained bloodline is to spit on our laws." "Worse," another said. "He plants doubt in the hearts of our young." Already whispers spread. Already some wonder if our customs are just. The High Chancellor raised her hand for silence. Her eyes glowed like embers, and her voice cut through the noise. "The human will be summoned. He will answer before this council. If he refuses, he will be removed from Valora Prime, permanently." A guard bowed and hurried off to carry the message. The chamber fell into uneasy quiet, though every counselor's thoughts burned with outrage. Meanwhile, Jared walked through the narrow alleys outside the barracks. His steps were steady, but his thoughts heavy. He knew the eyes watching him, the whispers following him. Yet each time he remembered Elira's trembling smile, her soft voice when she asked why he cared, he felt no regret. When he reached the marketplace, he found her again. Elira sat near the fountain, her tray empty. Her hands clutched her cloak. Tight as stones and scraps of food lay scattered around her feet, remnants of the crowd's cruelty. She looked up, and her eyes widened at the sight of him. "You came again," she said softly. "Of course," Jared answered. He sat beside her without hesitation, brushing away the scraps from the ground. "You shouldn't face this alone." She swallowed hard, her voice breaking. "You don't understand. They will destroy you for this. Already they hate me. Now they hate you." Jared leaned forward, his voice calm but unyielding. "Let them hate. They cannot take what's right. And what's right is simple: you deserve a seat at the table, same as anyone." For a long moment, Elira stared at him. The sounds of the market faded, and all she could hear was his voice. Her heart pounded with something she had never felt before. Not fear, not shame, but strength. She drew a slow breath, and for the first time, she lifted her chin high. But their moment of peace shattered when soldiers arrived. The crowd parted as armored figures marched forward, their spears gleaming in the sun. The lead soldier's voice boomed. "Human, you are summoned to the council. Your actions insult Valora Prime. You will answer for them." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Some smirked, expecting his fear. Others leaned forward, hungry for spectacle. Jared rose slowly. His height towered over most of the soldiers, but his face showed no fear. "Very well," he said. The soldiers sneered. "You walk into judgment. Do you not tremble?" Jared's eyes narrowed. "I've faced worse than judgment. Lead the way." The crowd erupted in murmurs as he was escorted through the streets. Elira tried to follow, but a guard shoved her back. She stumbled, her eyes burning with helplessness. Still, she whispered his name as he disappeared into the distance. Inside the council chamber, the tension was thick. Jared stood alone in the center while the counselors glared down at him. The High Chancellor leaned forward, her voice sharp as a blade. Human, you have violated our laws. You sat with one of stained blood. Do you deny this? I don't, Jared said firmly. His voice echoed in the chamber. I sat with her because she deserved dignity. No one deserves to be shamed for blood they did not choose. Gasps filled the room. One counselor slammed the table. Insolence. Another hissed. He seeks to teach us. The High Chancellor's eyes narrowed. You speak as if your people know better than ours. Jared met her gaze without flinching. Maybe we do. Because we've lived this before. We learned the hard way that hate destroys more than it protects. You think strength comes from purity of blood. But true strength comes from standing beside the weak. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some shouted for his removal, others demanded silence. But through the noise, Jared's words lingered. A few younger guards exchanged uneasy glances, doubt flickering in their eyes. The High Chancellor struck her staff against the floor, silencing all. Enough, human, you will be punished. You will be expelled from Valora Prime at dawn. And if you resist, you will face execution. Jared stood tall, his face calm. Do what you must. But know this, you can drive me out, but you cannot erase what I've done. She will remember. And so will you. The counselors scowled, their anger boiling. Yet behind their fury, a shadow of fear crept in. For the first time, someone had stood in their hall and spoken without trembling. Outside the chamber, Elira waited by the gates. When Jared emerged, his steps slow but steady. She rushed forward. Her hands shook as she touched his arm. They will banish you, she whispered, her voice breaking. Jared looked at her and smiled faintly. Then I'll go. But remember, Elira, this fight isn't just mine. It's yours too. Tears blurred her vision, but her heart burned with fire. She realized then that she could no longer remain silent. Jared's defiance had lit a spark inside her, and sparks had a way of turning into flames. The dawn came with heavy clouds that bled red across the horizon. The gates of Valora Prime were lined with guards, their armor gleaming in the cold light. Elira stood among the crowd, her cloak pulled tightly around her as the soldiers prepared to expel Jared from the city. The air was thick with tension, every whisper carrying through the silent streets. Jared stood tall, his hands bound but his face calm. Two guards flanked him, ready to march him to the shuttle bay. The council had made their decree clear. He was no longer welcome on Valora Prime. To defy tradition was to defy the Empire itself, and such defiance could not be allowed to remain. The crowd murmured as he passed. Some spat, others jeered, but not all eyes burned with hate. Some lingered with doubt, troubled by what they had witnessed. Elira saw it flickers of unease, shadows of shame, though no one dared speak. Her heart hammered in her chest. She had lived in silence for so long, bowing her head, hiding her voice. But now, watching him walk alone toward exile, she felt a surge of fire rising inside her. He had stood for her when no one else would. If she remained quiet now, she would betray not only him but herself. She stepped forward. At first, no one noticed. Her voice was small, trembling. Stop! The guards turned, their eyes narrowing. The crowd whispered, some laughing. But she did not falter. She drew in a deep breath, her voice louder this time. He should not walk alone. The laughter died. Silence rippled through the crowd. Elira pulled back her hood, revealing her face, her silver hair catching the morning light. Her eyes blazed with something no one had seen before: courage. This man, she said, pointing to Jared, sat beside me when all of you turned away. He saw me when you chose to pretend I was nothing. He gave me dignity when you gave me shame. And for this you call him guilty? The crowd stirred uneasily. The guards shifted, their grip tightening on Jared's arms. Elira's voice rose, echoing off the stone walls. You punish him because you fear him. But it is not his act that shames you, it is your own cruelty. Gasps broke through the silence. Some shouted at her to be quiet, others muttered angrily. But her words had struck deep. Jared's eyes met hers, steady and calm, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. The High Chancellor stepped forward from the council platform, her robe flowing like a shadow. Her voice was sharp as a blade. "Enough. You are stained by blood, girl. You have no right to speak." Elira trembled, but she did not step back. "You fear my blood because it carries truth. You call me stained, but it is your hands that are unclean." The crowd erupted in shouts. Some screamed for silence, others argued, their voices clashing like thunder. For the first time in years, the people of Valora Prime were not united. Doubt spread like cracks in glass. The Chancellor raised her staff, her eyes burning. "Seize her!" Guards lunged forward, but Jared moved first. With sudden strength, he tore free of his bonds, the rope snapping under his grip. He stepped in front of Elira, his body shielding hers. The crowd roared in shock. The soldiers hesitated, stunned by his defiance. Jared's voice carried like a command. "If you touch her, you'll prove everything she just said. That your law is built not on justice, but on fear." The silence that followed was heavy. Even the Chancellor faltered, her hand trembling on her staff. The crowd watched with wide eyes, torn between rage and doubt. Elira stepped from behind Jared. Voice steady now. "I will not be silent again. You may hate me, but I will speak. You may cast me out, but I will walk with my head high. And I am not alone anymore." Her words struck like lightning. The crowd shifted, voices breaking into argument. Some shouted for her removal, but others began to murmur in support. A few young aliens stepped closer, their eyes shining with quiet. Defiance. The seed of rebellion had been planted. The guards did not move. The Chancellor's face twisted with fury, but she saw what the crowd did not yet realize. The girl who had always eaten alone was no longer invisible. And beside her stood a human whose defiance spread like fire. Jared turned his gaze on the council, his voice calm but unshakable. "You can exile me, but you can't silence her anymore. The choice is yours. Will you rule by fear, or will you finally listen?" The Chancellor's lips pressed tight. She raised her staff, signaling the guards to stand down. The crowd gasped, their shock echoing across the square. For the first time, tradition had bent, but everyone knew this was only the beginning. The city of Valora Prime did not sleep that night. Whispers moved through the streets like wind through dry grass. What had happened at the gates spread to every corner. The outcast girl had spoken, and the human had broken his bonds to defend her. It was a story no one expected, and it shook the foundations of their belief. Merchants muttered behind closed doors. Guards argued in hushed tones, and families debated in secret whether the council's decree was truly just. For the first time in generations, doubt lived openly on Valora Prime. Elira sat by the river again, the glow of the red moons painting her face. She clutched her cloak tight, her heart racing with every memory of the day. Never had she spoken with such force, never had she felt so alive. Yet fear clawed at her chest. She had defied the council. That was a crime few survived. She turned when she heard footsteps. Jared approached, carrying a small lantern that flickered in the wind. His eyes were calm, though his body carried the exhaustion of the day. He set the lantern down and sat beside her. "You were brave," he said quietly. She shook her head. "I was terrified. That's what makes it brave," Jared replied. "Fear means you understand the cost. But you still chose to speak." Her eyes glistened as she whispered, "They will come for me now." "They might," Jared admitted. "But you won't face them alone." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of rushing water. Elira's heart swelled with gratitude, but also with something deeper, a bond she had never known, a warmth that grew stronger with each word he spoke. The following day, the council met again, their chamber filled with fury. The High Chancellor's voice cracked like thunder. "This cannot continue. Already the people question us. Already whispers spread of rebellion. The human and the girl must be silenced." One counselor hesitated. His voice was quieter, almost uncertain. "If we strike them down, we risk making them martyrs. The people are restless. They will not forget." The Chancellor's eyes burned. "Then we must remind them of fear." Orders were given. Patrols doubled. Anyone seen speaking with Alira or Jared would be punished. Markets closed their doors tighter, and guards prowled the streets. The city grew heavy with silence, the kind that trembles before a storm. But despite the pressure, cracks spread wider. In hidden corners, people whispered of Alira's words. Young workers, tired of being ignored by the council, spoke of her courage. Even some guards, their loyalty shaken, questioned whether tradition had blinded them too long. One evening, as Alira returned from fetching water, she found a loaf of bread left secretly at her door. Another day, a woman slipped her a flask of clean water with trembling hands. They did not speak, but their eyes carried respect, even admiration. When she told Jared, he nodded. "It's starting," he said. "They're afraid, but they're waking up." But the council would not let change come so easily. On the third night, soldiers stormed the quarter where Alira lived. They dragged her neighbors into the streets, demanding to know who supported her. Families wept as homes were searched, goods seized, and threats made. Alira hid in the shadows, her heart breaking at the sight of innocent people punished because of her. Jared found her trembling near the ruins of a shop, his jaw clenched with fury, but his voice was steady. "This is their answer. They want to crush the spark before it becomes a fire. What do we do?" She whispered. He looked at her with steady eyes. "We don't let the fire go out." The next day, Alira stood again in the marketplace. Her voice was louder now, steadier, though soldiers loomed on every corner. "They fear us because they know the truth. They can chain one, silence another. But they cannot silence all of us. We are more than their fear. We are more than the blood they call stained." The crowd stirred. Some backed away in fear, but others stepped closer, their eyes shining with defiance. A few even cheered softly before covering their mouths. The soldiers moved forward, but Jared placed himself at her side, unyielding. One soldier hesitated. His grip on his weapon faltered as he looked at her, then at the human beside her. Slowly, he lowered his spear. Gasps filled the square. Another soldier followed, uncertain but unwilling to strike. The council's grip was slipping, and the people saw it. The High Chancellor, watching from the balcony, clenched her fists. Her power was no longer absolute. The human and the outcast had planted something dangerous, hope, and it was spreading faster than she could crush it. That night, torches lit the streets as quiet gatherings formed. Farmers, merchants, workers, even a few guards whispered together. The name on their lips was the same, Alira. The girl who once ate alone had become a symbol, and beside her stood a human who dared to defy an empire. The storm was no longer coming. It had begun. The city square of Valora Prime had never held so many people. From the highest balconies to the lowest streets, thousands gathered, their faces tense with expectation. Torches lit the night, casting flickering shadows on the towering spires. The council stood on the grand platform, their robes gleaming, their expressions carved in stone. At the center stood the High Chancellor, her staff raised high, her voice thundering across the crowd. "These are the ones who dare defy us," she declared. Guards dragged Alira and Jared into the square, bound in heavy chains. "They spit on our traditions. They plant rebellion in your hearts. Tonight, they will be punished, and order will be restored." A hush fell. The people's eyes turned to the two figures at the center. Alira's cloak was torn, her silver hair tangled, but her gaze was steady. Jared stood tall, his chains clinking with every breath, his face calm as stone. They were beaten, but not broken. The Chancellor's voice rang again. This is the fate of those who forget their place. She raised her staff, signaling the executioners to step forward. But before they could move, Alira's voice cut through the silence. Clear, strong, unshaken. No more, the crowd gasped. Her voice was louder than the Chancellor's, filled with fire. You call me stained, you call him a criminal, but look at yourselves. You rule by fear, you silence voices, you shame the innocent, and still you claim it as justice? Murmurs swept the crowd. The guards hesitated. Some looked at one another, uncertain. Alira stepped forward, dragging her chains. You say my blood is weak. But strength is not in blood, it is in standing together, and I am not alone. Not anymore. She turned her eyes to Jared, who nodded once. Then, with a sudden sharp motion, he wrenched his chains apart. The metal shattered under his strength, clattering to the ground. Gasps filled the square as he stepped beside her, free, unbowed. The guards moved forward, but they faltered when the crowd surged. For the first time, the people of Valora Prime stepped between their rulers and the condemned. Farmers, merchants, workers, even young soldiers raised their voices. She speaks truth, one shouted. No more chains. Cried another. Justice for all bloodlines. Echoed a third. The Chancellor slammed her staff, fury burning in her eyes. Silence. You will obey, but her words drowned in the roar of the crowd. Thousands shouted as one, their voices shaking the very stones beneath their feet. The soldiers hesitated, torn between orders and the rising tide of their own people. Some dropped their weapons, others stepped aside. The Chancellor's power was crumbling before her eyes. Jared raised his voice above the storm. You cannot rule by fear forever. You tried to silence her, but now her voice belongs to all of them. This is the end of your chains. The Chancellor's face twisted with rage. She lifted her staff to strike, but a spear clattered to the ground behind her. One of her own guards had turned away. Then another, then another. The chain of obedience broke. Link by link, the people surged forward, not with violence, but with defiance. They filled the square, surrounding the council, their voices louder than any weapon. The Chancellor looked around, her power dissolving in the sea of faces. Her staff shook in her hand. And then, with a final cry, she fled the platform. Vanishing into the shadows of the spires, silence fell, broken only by the sound of chains dropping as Jared shattered Alira's bonds. She stumbled, but he caught her, steadying her with gentle hands. Her eyes shone with tears, but her voice was strong. It's over. No, Jared said quietly, gazing at the sea of people. It's beginning. The crowd cheered, their voices rolling like thunder through the night. Alira stood before them, no longer the girl who ate alone outside the hall. She was a symbol, a leader, her head held high. Jared stood beside her, the human who defied an empire, the one who gave her strength when she had none. Together, they looked upon the people of Valora Prime. Together, they had broken the chains of silence. And in that moment, beneath the red moons of the alien sky, a new future was born. Not of fear, not of shame, but of unity. Alira spoke the final words that echoed through the square, sealing the moment forever. No blood is dirty, no voice is unworthy. Tonight we stand as one. The people roared in answer, and the stars above seemed to burn brighter, as if even the galaxy bore witness to their defiance.